sky. The man closed his eyes and lifted his head to the heavens. He gazed into the black abyss for a time before his mind painted a sweeping vista of climbing mountains and rushing rivers onto the dark canvas of his closed eyelids. He bore the utmost of his imagination in the creation of every minutest detail of the landscape. He rippled the sides of his mountains forth into sheer cliffs and unleashed a blizzard onto the peaks to cover it with snow. He let the snow crush and melt onto itself, forming glaciers which filled the maw-ish chasms and leaned precariously over into the valley below. He extended the vast trees of the valley to about 4,000 fathoms of the peak, where he gradually weeded them out before allowing rare tufts of undergrowth to peek through the snow and cold to a bleak existence on the top of his little world. Strands of a pale green organic matter swaying slightly in a yield to the tumultuous gale tearing across the peaks. Soft. He moved his attention to the vast valleys that lay between these mountains and filled them with every kind of beast he had ever seen or heard of. Towering herbivores with muscular, trunk-like legs, lumbering in giant strides across the plains. Massive rows of teeth engaged in the constant labor of shredding plentiful foliage from the billions of massive trees that dotted and clustered about the landscape. Smaller creatures of a like diet run amok below these titans, filling the closer undergrowth with their silent chatter and wary, unified movement. Fire. Just as the mind moved to create sentient life, there was a peal of thunder with a massive red storm yawning into his consciousness. His mind, half in panic, half in quiet desperation, swept away this entire mental vista with a whim, focusing instead upon a fresh black abyss. Yet the red eruption leered closer. In a silent frenzy, he lowered his head and voyaged out into the blackness surrounding him with his senses. Sound. His ears immediately reported a sharp cry. No, there was the red storm again. He quickly ignored that sensation and stretched out beyond to hear a rush of wind in the distance, running through the branches, a gentle force shivering untold millions of leaves in a single primitive chorus, with the creaking accompaniment of their wooden giants, occasionally punctuated by the cry some annoyed creature. An overall lulling scene, contrasting sharply with the scarlet tempest following every sound with its ever-leaping intensity. Resist. The mind grasped for a new sensation to focus upon, to distract, filling with precious oxygen as its owner breathed deeply and long, identifying a scent all too familiar, intoxicating, invigorating. The natural fury looms upon him again, reaching out its talons, demanding absolute control. The mind quickly throws his focus beyond that overpowering scent, tasting cool, thick air foretelling of rain. The red storm batters away at his consciousness. Inevitable, becoming desperate now, the man rushes his imagination to spark his memory. Rain. When was the last time he could remember rain? He tried to mentally replicate the primal sensuousness that only fresh, cool water brings, almost tasting the wonderful, cool drops of life on his lips at last. Hopeless. The man sighs inwardly, realizing that he must appease the ever-growing red storm for but a moment, and fill his starved consciousness with reality for but a moment, before he could plunge once again into the dark abyss of self, and block out the red storm once again for another precious, oh so delightful minute of solitude, free of reality, free of pain. Fortress. Yes, the man releases his grasp on delusion, and the red storm comes rushing upon him. The pain flows like a river through his body, with a current that ebbs in some areas and floods over in others. Whirlpools of chaos taking a few tortured places by force. A liquid mass of tossing, churning, frothing, splashing, pain. Hurts. He opens his right eye, the left being bruised hours ago, and strains to see through the sweat and blood flowing from one of the many cuts across his brow. He blinks out the dripping liquid and squints at the scene around him. He is in the midst of many figures who are running through a dense forest. After his eyes adjust a bit more, he realizes that they are an assortment of pigs, light green tattoos emblazoned on their bare backs, simple hand axes, long dirks or stakes are fitted snugly into their belts, and small wooden bucklers are slung haphazardly over their backs. The pigs' simple, robed garments and occasional leather jerkins are stained with both the blood of apparent enemies glances down to realize that his bare leg has a gaping hole that has been hastily stuffed with cloth and wrapped with leather. Dried blood covers his leg below this wound, and despite the bandaging, flows lightly still. With every leap through the vegetation comes another percussion of pain, like the staccato of a bird song or drum beats pulsing within his head. He feels a dozen other cuts and bruises on his body, every bit of ruptured skin or pulverized blood vessel pulling and bleeding with every step. He remembers the precepts that he, as every other young Pict, is taught from birth to remember. His father's face staring down at a young son lying beaten, battered, and bruised after a training session. Accept every wound you suffer, every moment of torture that you will experience in your life as a challenge, and hence a blessing. Bleed. The man gasped for air and caught another scent amid the assortment of other smells of blood, sweat, and man. He caught the familiar hormone of fear. With the pounding in his body becoming more virulent, he realized that he too was terrified. Death. His father's face staring down at a youth preparing to enter a dark and indecipherable chasm. Welcome fear as a friend, for it keeps you focused on the danger you are in, though you must not let yourself become paralyzed by it, for if you do, you will die a coward. Hold. The man's pain was becoming distracting. Hide, reaching a crescendo of liquid fury as it flooded every cranny of his physical and spiritual being. Hide. With a violent exhalation, he withdraws into the sanctity of his mind, setting his body on a maintainable pace before shutting out all distractions. He partially closes his eye and moves his focus into the hazy, translucent abyss of his squinted eyelids. He wields his imagination and unleashes it onto this canvas, creating for himself a world to occupy his mind, his soul, from the red storm, which once again batters at the gates